changes water into wine. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They had no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. He called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. It's a Cabernet.
The first thing of it is a bit of toast, but anyway. In Isaiah 62, 1-5, we read these words. "For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, for Jerusalem's sake I will not remain quiet. Till her vindication shines out like the dawn, her salvation like a blazing torch. The nations will see your vindication, and all kings your glory. You will be called by a new name, that the mouth of the Lord will bestow. To be a crown of splendor in the Lord's hand, a royal diadem in the hand of your God. No longer will they call you deserted, or name your name desolate. But you will be called Hephzibah, and your name Beulah. For the Lord will take delight in you, and your land will be married. As the young man marries the young woman, so will your builder marry you. As the bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you." Wonderful promise of God's restoration of Israel in the end time under the Messiah. And it speaks about them being given a new name. Now it's quite intriguing to read that Israel will be given a new name because Israel itself was a new name. Jacob was given that name after he wrestled with God. And his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. Now Israel is told they will be given a new name. As I read this scripture and I was thinking about this passage from John's Gospel, I was thinking about our names. Do you like your name? I know some people who hate their names. Some people hate their names so much they change it by choice. Always have been a little jealous that at marriage a woman now has the choice of whether to change her name, to keep her maiden name, or take her husband's name, or a combined version. Although some of those combined versions are a little odd. But she gets that choice. Man doesn't get that choice. I know a number of people who changed their names after a radical break with their past. Many of you will know Bushy Fenter, who was a speaker for many years in the Vineyard. And he shared with us a very moving testimony one year at Eston about what had happened in his life and how he come to be known as Bushy, but his name was Alexander. And he preferred to be called Alexander. And that has always stayed with me. Our friend Winifred was always called Tammy. But after she came to know the Lord and made things happen in her life, she went back to Winifred, preferred to be known as Winifred. So the name under which she was baptized and given. Romeo, who's a Montague, falls in love with Juliet, the Capulet, and asks, "What's in a name?" In other words, would Juliet be any more lovely if she had a different name? Should he regard her as an enemy just because of her name? It's a great question, isn't it? What's in a name? What does the name signify? That brings me to John chapter 2, the story of the wedding in Cana. It's significant. It's interesting that Jesus does his first miracle at a wedding. Years ago, Johnny Carson, when he was still doing the Tonight Show, had a young boy on, an 8-year-old boy, who had rescued 2 friends from a coal mine somewhere. And Johnny Carson had this small boy on the show. And he was talking to the small boy, and turned out that this small boy was a Christian, went to church. And Johnny Carson then asked him about church and about Sunday school, and said to him, "Did you go to Sunday school?" He said, "Yes." "What did you learn about in Sunday school?" The small boy said, "We learned about when Jesus turned the water into wine." And Johnny said, "Well, what does that lesson mean for you?" And the small boy hadn't quite thought about that, so he thought for a while, didn't quite know what to say. It was sort of a bit of an awkward silence. Then he lifted up his face and broke into a smile, and he said, "I think it means that if you go to a wedding, you should invite Jesus." It's true. You go to a wedding, invite Jesus. The wedding took place at Cana. Cana is not in Judea in the south. Cana is in the north, in Galilee. Cana was known for three things: its thieves, its rebels, and its Gentiles. Herod the Great had to clear the area of Galilee 3 times from undesirables, twice in his life. In other words, he literally marched his army from the south to the north to get rid of the undesirables, twice. And it was in this Gentile territory, this place of thieves and rebels and Gentiles, that Jesus makes his home. It's in this place that he performed his first miracle in John's Gospel. John is telling us Jesus is a transnational figure. He's not just confined to the people of Israel. He goes beyond that. You'll notice that in this passage there is only one name mentioned. That's the name of Jesus. Now this is a wedding, and weddings in those days were not like they are today. We had a specified list. Everybody came to the wedding. It was a corporate event. So there were many guests. Jesus' disciples were there. Members of Jesus' family was there. Not to mention the bride and the bridegroom. But none of them is mentioned. Even Mary, Jesus' mother, is not mentioned. In fact, it's a subject for debate about why Jesus calls her woman. He doesn't call her mom or mother or even Mary. Now I want you to think, ladies, how it would go down if your husband or one of your children or grandchildren called you woman. Woman, make my food. You like me to feed it with you when you're paralyzed. So, it's a strange description. Very strange. The mother of Jesus only appears twice in John's Gospel, once here and once at his cross. So, John brackets Jesus' life with his mother. He puts his mother there at the start and at the end. And on both occasions, when Jesus addresses her, he calls a woman. Woman here in John chapter 2 and at the cross. And there is a link to the cross because Jesus says here, when she says to him, asking for help, he says, "My hour has not yet come." And his hour refers to his death. So he's referencing his death even here. So in this first act of Jesus' public ministry, his mother is present. And the exchange between Jesus and his mother is actually quite funny. She notices the wedding host has run out of wine. Jesus' response is, "They should have had a better wedding planner. They should have planned better. It's not my problem." But you'll notice she says that to him. He says to her, essentially, "It's not my problem." She turns around and says to the people, "Do whatever he tells you to do." Now, people think this is strange. If you've ever met a Jewish mother, you'll know this is not strange at all. Any Jewish mother anywhere in the world will think their son can turn water into wine. So, she just says, "Do whatever he tells you." I have the image of the mother of Jesus like a mother asking her child into a preschool classroom. "Come on, you can do it. Okay. Then you got this." But what made Mary believe that Jesus could do this? What did she see in his life up to that point that made this even possible, even feasible? And the miracle itself is interesting, isn't it? Don't you wish God would do something a bit more publicly sometimes? I mean, things more in the open. When you've got an unbelieving friend who, you're really trying to get interested in the gospel and you kind of tell stories and tell the answered prayer this thing that happened that is really remarkable. And you're so excited about it. And when you tell them about it, they sort of shrug their shoulders and mumble about, oh, coincidence. And then you think, it would be wonderful to be more like Bible times when miracles happen and everybody saw them. But this miracle, no one saw, except the servants. Only people who knew what happened there were the servants, the ones who actually went and got the water, put it in the jugs and brought it, and it was transformed. Not a flashy show of divine power. Only a few people knew what actually happened. Jesus was even reluctant to do anything. It wasn't meant to happen, but it was the persistence of his mother that led him to perform one of the most famous of his miracles. And in this miracle, God is showing us something, Jesus showing us something amazing about God's nature. God is responsive to human needs. God is not aloof from human plight. God doesn't stand apart from us in our trouble and just say, well, get on with it. It's not my problem. Even if the request comes at the wrong time, in the wrong way, God's heart is larger than those stone jars. Some people say God is indifferent to human suffering, so they say, well, there can't be a God. How can there be a God when there's so much suffering in the world? But this fine miracle challenges us by that conclusion, by suggesting that sometimes God does his work without posting it on Facebook, Instagram, and without the obedience himself. Throughout the New Testament particularly, Jesus does his work in a fashion that is often misunderstood and misrepresented. God responds to human suffering and human needs, just as many people are not happy with the response. The word grace occurs only 4 times in the Gospel of John. Only 4 times in John's Gospel. And that's in the prologue, first 18 verses of chapter 1. Why did John only mention grace these 4 times and not again? Well, if we take seriously that Jesus was really God in the flesh, in human form, that in Jesus the Word became flesh, what John is telling us is that Jesus is what grace looks like. It's what grace feels like. It's what grace tastes like. It's what grace smells like. This is grace in action. Jesus' signs don't show us. They show us. They don't tell us about grace. They show us what grace is, what abundant grace is. In John chapter 1 and verse 16, he says, from his fullness we have received grace upon grace. And turning water into wine is a revelation of God's abundant grace. And what does that grace taste like? The best wine when you're expecting the cheap stuff out of the box. One thing to say, Jesus is the source of grace. Quite enough to have an experience of it. And let's not overlook the abundance of his text. 6 water jars, each holding between 75 and 115 liters, were filled to the brim. Let's say each jar of 100 liters. That's 600 liters of wine. That is 750 milliliters of water. 800. The amount is extraordinary. And the quality, the best wine. Now, in those days, weddings didn't last a day, they lasted a week, and everybody came. So you had to be well prepared. And the host would serve the best wine at the start of the week when everybody could still taste something. So then the host would serve a nice black label Canoncal Pinotage at 1,900 rand a bottle, and everybody would be happy. And by the end of the week, he's serving the Immaculate Red box wine or the leftover Chateau Libertas, and nobody knows the difference. But not Jesus. When he turns the water into wine, it's the very best. And there's abundance. There is more than you need. Where have we experienced grace like this? You know, as Christians, when we talk about grace, we often reduce it to a doctrine, or we capture it as a doctrine, or reduce it to a slogan. You know, what is grace? God's riches at Christ's expense. And that's not wrong. But Jesus shows us here that grace is so much more. Grace is where God's abundant provision meets humanity's desperate need. Grace is where God's abundant provision meets humanity's desperate need. Now, how do we experience it? How do we live into this? How do we live it as part of our daily experience? Especially at the start of this year. I don't believe in New Year's resolutions. Somebody said this, I saw on Facebook this week. They said they're going to start a gym. At the beginning, or start a venue. At the beginning of the year, it's a gym, and after 2 months, it turns into a club. Because that's what happens to our resolutions. Not going to go to the gym. After about 2 weeks. I don't believe in resolutions, but I do believe in making a new start or setting a new course for the year ahead. So this year, I want to challenge you to do 4 things. To do 4 things. Slow down, talk less, listen more, become less busy. See, the reason we don't see miracles is well, we are too busy, we're too loud, we're too fast. So I'm going to challenge you to do those 4 things this year. Slow down. When I say slow down, I don't just mean drive slower, and I should say I should drive slower. I've got another love letter from the council with a picture of my car on my desk. So I don't just mean drive slower. When I say slow down, I mean take time to do the things that you love doing. And don't focus too much on the stuff that tires you out. Life is such that the things we naturally give to that, the things that come easiest to us, the things that we enjoy doing, we often leave those things to last. That really exhausts us, really kind of take out of us. We kind of think, well, I'll just do this first and then I'll get onto that. The problem is, the things that exhaust us, the things that take energy from us, take so much longer. The time left to do the stuff we want to do gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So we end up wasting time on things that are of little consequence and we don't give attention to the things that are really important. I sit here often, not that often, but fairly often. I sit here, actually over there, and I listen to eulogies. People who have lived 60, 70, 80 years. Some people who have been very successful in their businesses and done amazing things. Some of the people I know well, many of them I've never met. But I can tell you what, I sit in it over there, I listen to a eulogy of a person I didn't know, and unless somebody said something about the work they did, not one person will mention it. We are spending 8, 10, 12, 15 hours a day investing our lives in something that at the end will count for nothing. I've used this example very often. When Gwen's husband Ken died, Ken was a very successful businessman. He did very well for himself, a wonderful man, wonderfully generous man in so many ways. But the tribute that struck me most at his funeral was one of the grandsons who said he was always there watching my cricket match, watching me play rugby. Slow down. Slow down. When I was moderator, I used to speak to other ministers and I tell them this: take charge of your diary. If you don't take charge of your diary, someone else will take charge of it for you. If you don't manage your time, others will manage it for you. Give yourself time to pray, time to think, time to read, time to play, time to do nothing. Look at the life of Jesus. Jesus was aware that he only had a limited time to do what he needed to do. In fact, when Mary comes to him and says, they need your help, he says, my hour is not yet come. In other words, once I do this, the clock starts running. He knew he had a limited time. Even though he knew he had only 3 years to do what he had to do, he was always taking time off to rest, to pray. Now, why do we think we don't need that? So slow down. Talk less. Maybe you're one of those people who think you have a profound belief that you have something meaningful to contribute to every conversation, no matter what the subject matter. You've graduated from the University of Google. You have a postgraduate qualification from the YouTube College. You know everything about everything, and you can tell everybody about anything, any subject under the sun. You know something about that. Here's a thought. Try shutting up. It's going to be very hard, but boy, are your friends going to be happy. In this miracle, Jesus speaks just 30 words. And almost half of those are where he says, I'm not going to do anything. Talk less. Listen more. One of the consequences of talking too much is we listen too little. When we're engaging in a dispute with someone or we're having an argument, we seldom take time to listen to what the other person is saying. We're so busy planning a stinging comeback. With people in the discussion, we're busy planning that zinger that's going to get the other person, just knock them flat. We don't even hear what they're saying. And sometimes if we just listen to what somebody's saying, we would understand it better. No, we mightn't necessarily agree. We might understand where they are coming from. Jesus' mother comes to him and says they have no one. He's reluctant, but he listens. And like any good Jewish boy, he couldn't say no to his mother. Slow down. Talk less. Listen more. And finally, the most challenging of all, become unbusy. This is the hardest thing for us as Western Christians to do. The very hardest thing. And it's difficult for two reasons. Firstly, it's difficult because in our minds, busyness equals importance. If I'm busy, I must be important. And if I'm important, I must be significant. And secondly, and this is particularly true for those of us who work in positions that are well paid, busyness and importance justify the money that we earn. So when people ask us how it's going, and ministers do this all the time too, by the way, when people ask us how it's going, we stare off into the middle distance, we shake our heads, and we say, it's so busy, it's crazy. The decision to become unbusy has got nothing to do with being inactive. I'm not saying sit around and do nothing. Busy people are reactive. Unbusy people are proactive. Busy people never have enough time. Unbusy people always seem to have enough spare time to help anybody who has need. You've got friends like this, haven't you? No matter what time you find, no matter what's going on, you can phone them and say, I need your help, and they'll say, I'm there. And you've got other people who just never have time for anything. Some time ago, Albert and I were having a discussion about what do I do. They said, how do you describe to people what you do? I said, I'm so glad you asked that question because I do, in my working week, I do just two things. What type of do? I do just two things. Number one, I work at remaining attentive to God. I work at remaining attentive to God. And secondly, I work at making myself unbusy. Often people will just drop into the office and they'll say, I know you're busy, but, and I'll say to them, I'm not busy. Because that's the decision I've made to be unbusy. Well, my life isn't full. Not that I'm sitting there with my feet up on the desk doing nothing. But this is the conscious decision I've made about the way I wish to run my life. And I don't always get it right. Remain attentive to God and then make myself unbusy. Slow down, talk less, listen more, and become unbusy. Started talking about names. I want to end up by talking about names. There's a story about Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had conquered almost all the known world, and he was in what used to be Assyria, Persia. He was sitting on Nebuchadnezzar's golden throne, and he was judging the soldiers who had done various things. So the sergeant at arms would bring in these soldiers who had committed offences, and Alexander would pronounce judgment over them. And they brought in a young boy who had deserted, ran away, cowards, brought him in and brought him before the general. And Alexander said to this young boy, "What is your name?" But the boy was quiet. He said, "I asked you, what is your name?" The boy began to stand and said, Alexander, sir. And Alexander the Great came down off his throne, took the boy by the shoulders, stared at him in the face, and said to him, "Soldier, change your conduct or change your name." Change your conduct or change your name. See, we are named Christ followers. We are named as disciples of Jesus the Christ, or Christians, which means the little Christs. So we better act up to our name. Let's follow Jesus. Let's follow him this year. The only way we're going to know how to follow him is if we slow down, if we talk less, listen more, and create space by being under for God to speak to our lives. It's right. Lord, it's very easy to talk about these things, much harder for us to do them. We don't live in a world that values unbusyness. In fact, we live in a world that the busier you are, the more important you are, the more significant you are. We find ourselves sucked into that trap. But I pray, Lord, that you will help us. Help us in the weeks and months that lie ahead in this year. Help us to slow down. Help us to talk less. Help us to listen more. Help us, Lord, to become less busy. Not less active, not less involved, but less busy. Guide us by your Spirit, we pray, Lord. In Jesus' name.